Partridge Family was a real band. I thought they had a real 6-year-old drummer.
What
I
was it?
actually
It was
thought
a
Danny
show?
Partridge was playing, and then I grew up. And now nothing's real.
The Partridge Family
You
was
were
a
a
show.
believer.
Yeah.
Was it a show, the Partridge Family?
Yeah, and a group, and David Cassidy.
Right.
goes on
And then the
on.
Monkees, they say, oh, that is a band. Well, I didn't,
It was a TV band.
Oh.
Anyway, thank you very much. A rainy day here in New York City. Listen, outrage is growing over complete disrespect against police officers caught on camera.
New York City officers drenched with buckets of water while they were trying to make arrests.
And it didn't stop there. Rob Schmidt joins us now with how the NYPD is responding and going back to that block today, I imagine.
Yeah, we're going to see how this all turns out today, guys. Of course, most of us count on police to keep our communities safe, and that makes these incredibly disrespectful videos so hard to watch. Take a look.
Oh my God, they came over here to talk to them that they violated. Yo, they violated them. They violated them. No, they violated them. Oh, they not stopping.
And they're right over the head right there. And it doesn't stop there just with the water. Watch here as a shirtless man hurls an empty bucket. Look at that, right into the head of that police officer, hitting him right in the head as he tries to make an arrest. I mean, can you believe this? I mean, that's assault. NYPD Chief Terrence Monahan sounding off on Twitter, calling the acts reprehensible. New York City's mayor and 2020 presidential hopeful Bill de Blasio calls it completely unacceptable, adding the behavior will not be tolerated. An investigation is underway. You know, a lot of police officers blame de Blasio, guys, for this type of behavior, saying that he divided police from the communities, and that's how he got elected mayor.
He's never got along with the NYPD.
No.
Remember, they turned their backs on him because
Right.
he shows up or doesn't show up for funerals or shows up late. He didn't show up a couple of weeks ago. He's more interested in running for president and sleeping till noon.
Well, at least he did put out that response and condemn this. The amount of restraint that those
Thank you,
police
Rob.
officers showed was incredible. It's really hard to watch that. You're seeing an empty bucket being thrown at one of their heads, water, and people laughing.
Yeah, we've got a panel coming up to talk about this and what the men and women who wear the uniform put up with these days in many cases around the country. One police source told the New York Post they blame Mayor de Blasio's hands-off approach to these guys, is what the quote was from the Post. Also, Pat Lynch, the president of the PBA, blames it all on anti-cop rhetoric. He said, our elected officials refuse to allow us to take the streets back. As police officers, we need to draw a line. In situations like this, we need to take actions to protect ourselves and the public.
The Police Benevolent Association said our anti-cop lawmakers have gotten their wish. The NYPD is now frozen, a result, they say, of the anti-police rhetoric.
We're going to be talking about this in detail. We're not going to let it go because this has got to stop. It's got to turn around. The NYPD hats are worn almost like Yankees and Mets hats around the world.
Yeah.
You wore that, especially after 9/11. And they're also, not because they're rich, it's because they're known as the standard, the cutting edge standard for how to be law enforcement.
True.
And I just think it's symbolic on so many ways. And that's going to be seen around the world.
That they're not allowed to do their job. What do you think about this? Please email us, friends@foxnews.com. Also, we are on Facebook.
One of those happened in Harlem. The other one, the cop was trying to arrest a guy on the hood of that car in Harlem. The other one happened in Brooklyn.
And by the way, maybe you think the cops did the right thing, showing great restraint. It absolutely shows great restraint.
Unbelievable.
No doubt about it. But maybe you call
Well,
for
that one
backup.
cop, the one in Harlem, was by himself. So if he had tried to arrest them,
Right.
no telling how it might have gotten out of hand.
Terrible. All right. Meanwhile, we got a Fox News alert. You know about the crisis at the border. Well, yesterday, the acting Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McAleen announced that migrants who entered the country in the last 2 years, anywhere in the country, can face an expedited removal where they won't go through the lengthy court process. For years it's been applied. This rule has to migrants who have been caught within 100 miles of the border who entered in recent weeks. Now it can be anywhere in the country and entered the country in the last 2 years. This is completely different, and they're hoping this helps.
Unless the folks express fear about going back home or if they passed an initial screening interview for asylum.
So Kevin McAleenan says this is called expedited removal. They're going to have that authority. It's an effort to address an ongoing crisis, as we see at the border, by freeing up beds in detention centers and reducing a backlog of more than 900,000 cases. But instead, as Senator Ron Johnson says, full bore catch and release. They're saying catch and send back. Of course, the ACLU has a problem with that. The Trump administration is throwing everything they can. They have that asylum seekers, they say, in an effort to turn everyone's humanly possible away. I think that you have to give one thing. You have to salute the administration. Congress is not helping at all. The courts are not helping at all.
Right.
And he, the President of the United States, is being as resourceful as possible.
Trying to find other ways.
Three countries are emptying out into our country.
Well, if the Congress won't change the laws or pass new laws, take the laws that are on the books and figure out how they're applicable.
It's going to free up some beds in the detention center, they're saying. Not some, a lot. And it's also going to reduce the backlog of these court cases. Dianne Feinstein has a statement about this. Today's announcement that the administration will quickly deport immigrants anywhere in the country without giving them their day in court is just one more attack on our immigration system and the rule of law.
Yeah, right. The rule of law, which you're ignoring, an immigration system that has failed and hasn't been updated, that you have been there for about 55 years and done nothing about.
Ken Cuccinelli, the acting director of USCIS, says this is going to help enforce the law of the land. Watch.
It is a head-shaking surprise to me when I hear elected senators, and frankly, the bill that this is based on is bipartisan, who still oppose actually enforcing the law. President Trump is enforcing the law, or he's trying to. It's Congress that needs to get its act in gear. There's over 1 million people in this country who have orders to leave the country who are disobeying those orders. That's the other pool from whom ICE has to go after for deportation. So they have a big job, and this regulation really just takes us back to the original statute, will help them do their jobs more smoothly, more easily, and safer for the officers as well.
They just got to put him up for nomination. He's doing a great job, Ken Cuccinelli. Meanwhile, the House last week on Thursday, with all the huge news coming out last week with all the squad versus the president versus the speaker, we missed the fact that the House passed, basically on a party line, a $15 minimum wage, $231 to $199. And they said they're going to phase it in over the next few years. Small businesses in many corners of the country quivered because their margins are so small. You start raising up the labor rate, either they got to cut it back, everybody else who was getting 15 goes up, or they maybe got to go out of business.
No chance, though, it will pass in the Senate. But $15, that's not enough, Brian, for some people.
What do you mean?
Some want $20 an hour. Have you heard about this story?
I have.
Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib is now saying she thinks minimum wage should be $20 at least. Listen to this.
Think about that for 1 minute. And people cannot live on those kinds of wages. And we can't allow people to be living off of tipped, relying on tipped wages. It's just not, or whatever they call it, tipped income, because it's just not enough to support our families. It should be $20 an hour, $18 to $20 an hour at this point. They say, oh, this is going to raise the cost, but I can tell you, milk has gone up, eggs has gone up, everything has gone up, the cost of food has gone up, the cost of a lot of things that we need has gone up already.
Right, so there she is talking about maybe she suggests that the federal minimum wage for tipped employees should be $18 to $20 an hour. She was appearing in Detroit at the One Fair Wage event. They lobby for restaurant workers. And currently, and I did not realize this, the federal minimum wage for tipped employees is $2.13 an hour.
Yeah.
And so what she was saying is, you know what? And you heard the soundbite right there. It should be closer to 18 to 20. However, as we heard from Bernie Sanders in the last 48 hours or so, he's going to start paying his employees $15 an hour, but he's going to have to cut back their hours because they can't afford it.
These small businesses can't afford this, though. They would have to fire people. For some people, it would be great because their wages would go up significantly.
Right, and we told you about the Congressional Budget Office report that looked at the increasing minimum wage just before they did pass the wage in the House. And what it looked at was the minimum wage if you were to increase it to $10 an hour or $12 an hour or $15 an hour. And they said there's about a 2/3 chance that the change in employment would lie between 0 and a reduction of 3.7 million workers. So up to close to 4 million people could lose their job with an increase of that size with the minimum wage.
Like many of you, I've had probably about 5 to 7 tip jobs. I started as a busboy. I used to do a bus, clear the tables, and we used to rotate washing the dishes. And at the end of the day, you pool your tips. It's one of the best jobs you can have when you're breaking in. You don't even expect that check. It's almost a surprise when you get a $60 or $70 check at the end of the week because you work hard, you get great tips, and if you're good, guess what? Other restaurants want you. They will take you off of your better jobs. And if your one job doesn't pay enough, guess what you do? You get another job. That's what you do in your 20s. Having 2 jobs, part-time jobs while going to school is something people have done since the turn of the last century. And now all of a sudden people want to make that job something you can make a career out of while destroying small businesses. And those owners work about 60 hours a week. And now you're telling them their labor force has got to make more maybe than they do?
Well,
Forget
and a minimum wage job is not meant to be a career.
Of course.
It's meant to help you get your start. We were all in high school. We were in college when we had these when I was waiting tables. Yeah. Unless you're at a very fine restaurant, most of those people at the fine restaurants, that is their career. Right. But they make tons of money. If you're working at a McDonald's or at a small little restaurant where you're making tips, you're right. If you're nice to the people, you make a lot of money.
Absolutely.
So what do you
other restaurants can hear about you when they want you.
Correct.
So what do you think? Are you a small business person? You work in a restaurant? What do you think about the suggestion that $18 to $20 an hour for tipped employees? Friends of FoxNews.com. Also, we're on Facebook. And one final note, Gallup has come out with their Economic Confidence Index, and it looks at current economic conditions and the views you feel about how the economy is going. And right now, it's doing great.
Yeah, the U.S. confidence has improved in July. 53% say it's excellent or good. 34% say it's okay, it's fair. 12% say poor. 1% no opinion. No doubt about it. People are looking at this, and some are frustrated with the economy. We have over 300 million people in this country. Not everyone's going to be pleased, but man, the majority has to look around and say we're doing pretty well.
Massive gains in the stock market. Last month alone, the NASDAQ, the Dow, and the S&P, they all reached new highs in early July.
Yeah, 27,000 on the Dow, and you look at the job gains for the month of June, things are humming. All right.
Doing well.
A little good news.
Jillian has some headlines for us. Hey, Jillian.
That's right. Good morning to you. Following a number of stories, and we begin with this Fox News alert. Foul play is suspected in the death of an Ole Miss college student. A local NBC affiliate reports Ali Kostal was shot 8 times. Police have not confirmed that report. A deputy discovered Kostal's body near a lake while on routine patrol about 20 miles from the Mississippi campus. The 21-year-old was last seen on a security camera walking near a bar on Friday night. Turning now to extreme weather, flash flood warnings in effect right now as a cold front pushes out a deadly heat wave in the Northeast. Powerful storms toppling trees onto cars in Philadelphia, leaving thousands without power. And look at this in New Jersey, strong winds damaging a McDonald's sign. And we're also keeping a close eye on the south as a tropical depression forms off the coast of Florida. Janice will have an update on all of this. The Trump administration looking to tighten regulations for food stamps. The proposal by the Agriculture Department would change the expanded eligibility for SNAP recipients by cutting off Americans with higher incomes who do not need the assistance. 3 million people could be cut from the program, which would save the USDA more than $2 billion a year.
Take a look right now. Let's go across the Atlantic Ocean and a Fox News alert. We've got a live look at the door at 10 Downing Street, where the Prime Minister lives. That's where Boris Johnson is expected to become the next Prime Minister later today.
Yeah, what will he bring to that?
Brexit.
Douglas Murray with the Henry Jackson Society is author of the upcoming book, The Madness of Crowds, and he joins us now. Good morning, Douglas.
Good morning. Very good to be with you.
Nice to have you. What can we expect today? What is if Boris Johnson does become the next Prime Minister, what happens with Brexit?
Well, the first thing is that very little happens immediately other than a complete change of tone. Boris Johnson was, of course, one of the leaders of the Leave campaign back in 2016. We then, unfortunately, had a Remain Prime Minister. And this will be the first time since we voted to leave the EU that we've had a Prime Minister completely dedicated to actually getting us out of the EU. The problem for Boris Johnson is that the parliamentary arithmetic here in Westminster doesn't change. So there's going to be be a change of tone, but there's not a change of the realities on the ground at the moment. But nevertheless, it's an important change.
Yeah, I guess he's got 3 months to get it done or leave without a plan, but just flat out leave. And if a guy's going to author this plan, you got to think that he's going to be able to pull it off in some way. I know this, too. Immigration matters. He was talking, Boris Johnson, about everyone should learn to speak English there. When it comes to open borders, what is Europe doing and what are they learning from us when it comes to immigration?
Well, it's very interesting. One of the reasons why the UK voted to leave the EU was because, of course, in 2015, we saw this extraordinary sight of the EU completely failing to have any grip on its external borders. And this terrified the British public, just as it terrifies publics around the world. And we've noticed, I mean, I wrote about this in my 2017 book on the strange death of Europe, on immigration, identity and Islam, that you know, we are all in the first world countries struggling with this era of very easy movement from the developing world seeking to move to the developed world. You've got it in America. We had it in catastrophic numbers here in Europe in 2015. We're all struggling with it, but we're struggling with it more than we need to. It's not quite as difficult as it's currently being portrayed.
Let me play for you what some of the Democratic candidates are saying about open borders. Listen to this.
I have called for the repeal of Section 1325 of the Immigration and Nationality Act.
Let's forever after never criminalize another person who comes to this country seeking refuge or asylum at our border.
I think treating it as a civil offense is the right approach.
I do not think we should criminalize children and parents coming across the border who are seeking asylum.
What's your advice to all of them based on what you're seeing that's happening there in the UK?
Look, the biggest problem on the migration question is that nobody wants to look at the deeper questions. So let me just throw one out there. Can the entire developing world move to the developed world? Yes or no?
Can the
My
whole
view is
developing
obviously
no.
not. Obviously not. Exactly. So this is what the open borders advocates will not contend with, but we need to make them contend with it. For instance, here in Europe, people are very proud of having, you know, welfare states. Now, you can have open borders or a welfare state, but you can't have both. Because you cannot have anyone from the developing world just walking in and taking advantage of the welfare state. It'll last for no time at all. These are the questions which we have to make open borders advocates start to contend with, and they just aren't at the moment.
Douglas, I'll play it out for you because it's here. If you are against open borders or if you are concerned about immigration, you're racist, sexist, misogynist, whatever, what you do, it doesn't matter. We're not talking color. We're talking culture. You're in a country to keep that culture going. It's not a matter of the color of your skin. It's not your gender or your sexuality. We just don't want to destroy the color of the culture of the country.
Right. So what's happening in America, as I see it, is exactly the same thing as has been happening in Europe in recent years. There has been a mainstreaming of the most extreme arguments from the open borders advocate. And it's been, I'm afraid to say, it's been too little contested so far. The people who are so-called open borders advocates are the wild extremists in all of this. They are the people saying you shouldn't have laws, not just, we want to fiddle with the laws that exist or slightly change them, but they're saying we want no laws. We want no difference between legal and illegal. We want no difference between asylum seeking and people seeking an economic improvement in their life. These are incredibly extreme claims and extreme demands, and they are being mainstreamed into the American debate as they were mainstreamed in recent years into the European debate. And the result of it will be in America, as it has been in Europe, there will be a counter move.
Yep. Douglas, thank you so much for weighing in on this. Very fascinating.
Yep. I want you to come back every day. You make too much sense. The Madness of Crowds is coming up. It's going to be a book that's coming out soon. Thanks so much. Meanwhile, coming up straight ahead is the video.
Governor there resigned over those vulgar text messages. Fox News correspondent Brian Yenes is live in San Juan with what to expect today. Hey, Brian.
Hey, good morning. Well, today will be surely the 11th straight day of protest. This is the aftermath of the protest last night. This is the vandalism. Ready? Vandalismo es siempre votar a los mismos. Vandalism is always voting for the same people. And you can see here, renuncia, which has been the call sign for this entire protest throughout the last 2 weeks. That means resign. And if you look over here, here's the charred sort of remains of what's left. And take a look at last night. I mean, this was the scene last night. Tear gas canisters being fired at protesters. Everything was peaceful up until 11 o'clock at night. The police say some folks started throwing rocks. They warned people 4 times, and then they began to disperse the crowd. This after an incredibly historic day of protest. More than 500,000 people taking onto the major highway, Las Americas Expressway. Ricky Martin and big-time Puerto Rican stars were leading the way. People just upset about Governor Rosselló, calling him a corrupt administration. And blaming him for just mismanagement of millions of dollars. Yesterday, our very own Shepard Smith had the exclusive interview with Governor Rosselló, who spoke for the first time since this crisis began.
Governor, who's come forward to support you in the middle of this chaos?
There are folks that have supported me.
Who specifically is supporting you today?
The rule of law. There are people.
Okay, could you give me one name?
See them out there. There is a protest.
Governor, you're not able to give me the name of one person in Puerto Rico who supports you continuing as governor. Is that correct?
That interview making headlines all over the world, but especially here on the island. That mayor who he says that one mayor supports him, the mayor from San Sebastián, I spoke to him, Javier Jimenez. He says he does not support the governor. Guys?
All right, Brian, thank you so much. Stay safe down there.
Yep.
All right, we're going to hand it over to Steve, who's downstairs with a panel. Hey, Steve.
Thank you, Ainsley. Outrage this morning over the complete disrespect towards New York City Police Department officers being drenched with water, all caught on cell phone video.
Oh my God, they came over here to talk to them that they violated. Yo, they violated them. They violated them. No, they violated them. Oh, they not stopped.
Oh, man, and that's not the only one. A separate incident on the other side of town. This video showing a bucket being hurled at a cop. Hit him right in the head. Here with reaction, our law enforcement panel. We've got Blue Lives Matter, New York City founder, New York Sergeant Joseph Imperatrice, screen left, along with former New York City Police Department officer Darren Porcher, screen right, and former Westchester County Police Sergeant Steve Cardian. Guys, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Joe, New York City police officers are furious at this video.
I don't know if I can get upset about anything, but I was sick to my stomach watching this. You had officers ultimately walking away with their tail between their legs because they were bullied. The other scene, you see officers getting buckets thrown at them, and not once did the officers turn around for their safety to see what else was coming. Not once did you see them take enforcement action. And you rewind 5 years, and Danny Pantaleo took police action because someone was resisting arrest. Someone committed a crime. And not one person, not one official came out on social media and defended Danny. But because yesterday looked terrible, they go on social media reminding the public that they need to respect the police. And that's disgusting. Police officers are upset, and this is how cops get killed.
Steve, you blame the mayor of New York City.
We have an amazing president that supports law enforcement and the police, and now we look at this progressive mayor that has tied the hands of the police. So he's taken away stop and frisk. He's taken away many of the tools that they could use, the broken windows theory. And you create a reactive or less than reactive police department when in a city like this, you need a proactive police department.
Dr. Porcher, you say this is a result of the Ferguson effect.
Absolutely. When we go back to what happened in Ferguson, you had police officers that took more of a standoffish effect in terms of the public. And then we move forward to when the Eric Gardner verdict, the Eric Gardner indictment did not occur against Officer Pantaleo in Staten Island a couple of years ago. Mayor de Blasio came out and vocally stated his opposition to that. He felt that Officer Pantaleo should have been indicted. We fast forward to a couple of weeks ago, Mayor de Blasio made that same statement that he felt that the Department of Justice should have taken action against Officer Pantaleo. But what that states is the separation between the police department and Mayor de Blasio. And you have to realize police officers are our first line of defense as citizens, and he's not holding up to the commitment of the social contract.
Guys, a couple of years ago, it was a funeral for a police officer, and the mayor of New York was there, and police officers, rank and file, turned their backs on him. him. Remember that video?
I was there with my son in 2014 with Luan Ramos, and it was a show of force to let the mayor know exactly how the members feel.
Joe, you say that this video shows it's okay to commit crimes and there's no repercussion.
You know, you have raised the...
Please won't you be my neighbor?
You got to look twice. That was not Mr. Rogers. That is your shot of the morning, and it's Tom Hanks who has transformed himself for the movie into Mr. Rogers.
That is the new trailer for A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. It's about a journalist writing a profile on the beloved TV host.
Yeah, it's all based off that book, but we remember him throughout our childhood. Hanks earning rave reviews for his resemblance to Mr. Rogers. I think he's going to break out in this. I think he's going to become a big star. The movie hits theaters in November, but the question is, can America still embrace Mr. Rogers?
Yes,
Fred Rogers.
Yes, we loved him. This was the man when I was little I was going to marry. I told all of my friends I'm going to marry Mr. Rogers. Yes.
You know, I was actually at the Smithsonian the day that Fred Rogers was there, and they put that sweater, which was knitted by, I believe, by either his mother or his wife, in the permanent collection at the Smithsonian. He has been a beloved member of the American family for so long, and now Tom Hanks is unbelievable as Fred Rogers.
And they also have Archie Bunker's chair in the Smithsonian. Let's bring in
They have a lot of stuff in the Smithsonian.
Excuse me. Let's bring in Jonathan Mars, Fox News contributor, theologian, and ethicist specialist. Did I say that right?
Sure.
All right.
Sounds good.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Well, I mean, it's the first time I've seen you since...
To talk about Mr. Rogers.
Yes, to talk about Mr. Rogers. First off, is morally and foundationally, is Mr. Rogers where we're at right now in this country?
No, to be completely honest, when you just hear that music, it brings back good things,
Takes
right?
all of us back,
that there is so much chaos in the world right now. I did not come to talk about Mr. Rogers, but there is so much chaos in the world. When we see Mr. Rogers and we hear that music, we go, there's peace.
That's my safe space.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
But you did actually come to talk about Mr. Rogers.
Really?
I mean, ethically, is this something we should bring back?
Yeah, we should bring back Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
You know, I think what we recognize is that we do have values in our country that are foundational, and programs like that just told families, like, be at peace, be together, recognize that being a good neighbor is a good thing. Being
They have Daniel Tiger now as the animated version of it. You interviewed the lady who came up with that,
yeah, I
and
did.
she bought the rights, right,
Yeah,
to Mr.
she
Rogers.
did.
It's a great show. If you have kids out there, Daniel Tiger, they teach so many great stories and lessons to our kids. What do you think about the next election, 2020 Democrats?
And this brings a little bit into what you mentioned, Brian, about values and whether it's what we need in our country right now. We are seeing right now the Democrats, all of the Democratic presidential contenders, using moral arguments, taking on the high ground, saying, listen, yeah, the economy might be good. This guy might be a pragmatic businessman, but we cannot allow this to happen because of all of the disaster that's going on in our country and a moral perspective. And I think the Republicans have a huge responsibility to say, hey, it's not that simple. Let me give you an example very quickly, is immigration. Right now, the Democratic contenders are all saying open borders is the right thing to do for immigrants. It's actually the worst thing for immigrants. I've seen it. You know, I lived in the Bronx for many years with immigrants. Many of them crossed illegally. The fact that they got in is a terrible situation for them, right? Because they're
They never
living.
feel like they belong.
Exactly. It's bad for our country that they're here illegally. It's bad for them. Look at what our country has done in the past. Ellis Island. Yes, they came over without having visas, without being legal, but we allowed them to do it in a legal way.
Right. But Jonathan, you know the Pope and the Catholic Church, for the most part, are on the side of the migrants.
Yeah. You know, I don't think the bishops in the United States would say open borders is the way to go. But yes, I think we are all on the side of the migrants, but we have to do it in a way that's good also for not only those who are here already, but those who are coming over. And the idea of living in the shadows for years and years and years is not good for immigrants. And the Republicans have to say, we're going to give solid arguments of why this is morally wrong, because the Democrats are going to say, we are the ones who are in the right here, and you guys are the evil Republicans.
So
it's not true.
If a kid comes across the border with a parent that we assume is theirs, but at least 30% of the time is not, the kids are being used as props and recycled through. How can you be someone who's moral and virtuous at the same time tell those families you got to go back home?
Yeah, of course, we know it's a complicated situation, right? But what's happening now is this. We're saying you're not allowed to come, but we're going to keep porous borders and we're going to let you come. Okay? And you're not allowed to get a job, but we're actually going to let you get a job. And we're not allowed to make a lot of money, but we're going to let you make a little money. And then you have to live in the shadows for all these years. That is a bad system also for the immigrants. And the idea that the Democrats here are morally justified in saying President Trump is evil, we are good.
I have a big heart.
Yeah, we're going to let everyone come in. That is not the right way. We have to be tough, of course, and to have a secure border.
Let's talk about political correctness. There's a town in South Carolina, Tega Cay. It's right outside of Charlotte, near Rock Hill, South Carolina, northern part of the state. And there is a memorial statue outside of the police station there.
Yeah.
They put scripture in there, and look at this. They removed the word Lord.
Yeah.
That's where
From
we
the
are.
scripture.
What's your reaction?
Yeah, and there was just a new ruling, too, from a court that prayer was not allowed in a public school district,
in Greenville
right?
County, yeah.
But you know, the precedent in the highest courts, in the Supreme Court, is so strong to say, because of what our founding documents say, that is, that Congress should pass no law that would prohibit the free exercise of religion, number one, and should establish no religion, does not mean that people cannot express their faith publicly. And the activist groups are using the lower courts to try to say you have to speak about faith only in your homes or in your church.
And they've
behind
been very
closed doors.
effective at it.
They have been effective, but in the end, there is such strong document proof that our founding fathers did not mean that.
Yeah.
And we have to get back to what's actually written.
It's happening in South Carolina, in the Bible Belt. Conservatives, imagine if that were your job, to remove the word Lord. Would you be able to do it?
The pendulum will swing, because there is so much. I've spent the last 4 or 5 months living in the Midwest, in mostly Cleveland, Ohio. There is so much faith. There's so much goodness.
Yes.
In South Carolina, of course, too. Also in New York City. But we can't allow activists to get. What they're trying to do is erase the name and the voice of God from the public square. And that is not good for our country.
And you've been living in Ohio, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of goodness. You're talking about Geraldo, right? Because that's where he went.
I am not talking about Geraldo. He is a good
shouldn't.
man, though.
He
He
is
is good.
good.
He's a
All
good
right,
friend.
Jonathan,
Yes.
good to have you back on the couch.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay, Jillian's over there. She has some headlines for us. Hey, Jillian.
That's right. Good morning. And let's take a look at this, because it's a chilling new video appearing to show refugee children praising ISIS. The video from Syria shows kids chanting, quote, "We will stand on the heads of the apostates and crush them one by one." The children are also waving their fingers to support the terror group. A monitoring group believes their mothers may have been radicalized. 2020 hopeful Cory Booker wants to punch President Trump.
You're saying he hurts you, and my testosterone sometimes makes me want to feel like punching him, and which would be bad for this elderly, out of shape man that he is.
Booker isn't the first candidate to talk about the president like that. As you recall, last year, former VP Joe Biden said he wanted to, quote, beat the hell out of President Trump. How about this? Amanda Knox wants you to help her throw the best party ever. Knox and her fiance are asking for donations for their space theme to Italy for a panel about false convictions. Suggested donations range from $25,000 to $10,000. They'll thank people with poems or dance floor shout-outs. Knox was released from an Italian prison in 2011 after being cleared